With all due respect to the Air Force, I believe that some of them will prove to be of interplanetary origin.
It's rotating.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers. There have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things. It is this group of observations that we now are attempting to resolve.
Today I'm going to be interviewing a really important witness from the 2004 Nimitz Tic Tac UFO encounter, none other than Petty Officer and Fire Controlman Gary Voorhis. Gary, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Just to set some context for the people, so we're talking about 2004, off the coast of San Diego. You were in the Navy at the time. You were conducting simulated air defense exercises off of the USS Princeton, which is a guided missile cruiser, and what's the first you heard or saw about the UAP? And this is Kevin Day who's tracking them.
Kevin Day, on and off. You got to remember, we do have watch shifts. So, I mean, I'm sure Kevin probably was volunteering for them at that point. But, so you'd have different people up there. But whenever we're doing the actual exercises and stuff like that, that's all going to be Kevin.
Right.
Yeah.
And so for anyone listening, so Kevin is looking at the radar. He's seeing clusters of anywhere from 5 to 10 of these craft appearing at any given time. So Gary, I heard in another interview that you peeked over, and caught a glimpse of Gary's console when you pretended you were trying to fix something or something like that. Is that true?
What I was doing is just like always just trying to make up bullshit reasons to be in combat and watch the consoles. I was watching the I mean, it was no big deal for me to see the consoles. They were my consoles. I'm the one that repaired them, fixed them, anything that went wrong with them. Those were all my, all in our realm of responsibility. So it was, it was no big deal to be standing behind them because I already had a high enough clearance to be in there. So
right.
Anything that's in there, I can see. Now,
so what did you see?
Well, basically, if you saw the regular radar sweep, it doesn't look a whole lot different than like when you're looking at like any of these modern war films where they show you these digital readouts where they have the small little triangles and then it has a little line that comes off and it tells you, whatever information it's squawking or whatever information is relevant to it. And, under unknown, it would just, it would have that incomplete or, whatever the nomenclature at the time was. I can't quite exactly remember what it was, but, he would just, I'd say, all right, well, where are the tracks? And they just point to these little triangles off over to this corner. Oh, these 3 or these 5 or these 10 here, and it's like, and they go, and they're doing 100 knots. And then we just talked about how slow they were going at first. It's like, what the hell are they?
So 100 knots is like 115 miles per hour.
Yeah, which for an aircraft really isn't all that fast.
Kevin said he tracked these things for about 4 days leading up until November 10th. Do you remember on what day you first saw them or heard about them? Did you hear about it as soon as the first day, or was it maybe like day 2 or 3?
I would have heard about it the first day because that's when, or not maybe probably the second day because I think it was towards the evening that they first started tracking them. But it would have been that next morning that I heard about it because as soon as they would have needed to take down any of their systems, my computer system runs I have a computer that's the spy computer. It runs all the spy computer systems and stuff. So I would have had to be down there to reset the computer for them.
So a counter argument might be these could have been phantom tracks. This might have just been something that existed on the radar, but not in real life. But you were then brought in, right, to conduct a diagnostic test, and you actually concluded that the radar system was working perfectly, right?
Yeah, the radar system was a phased array radar. It was working well within tolerance. As a matter of fact, it was working better than you could even expect it to work. The guys on our boat that worked on the actual radar itself were, very skilled, top-notch guys. Matter of fact, we had gotten, battle-y on our last deployment because we were the only ship that was battle ready for the entire, time we were shooting Tomahawks at Afghanistan. We were the only ship that never went down. We were always able to fire, and we got a good reputation for having a well-oiled team and a well-maintained equipment. And you can't spoof a phased array radar because of how many feed horns that it uses. It's not just a standard model where you have a single feed horn, shoots a signal out, then it loops around, and then the next time it comes around, it pulls the signal in. It's a phased array, which means that it's constantly transmitting and then constantly receiving at the same time. And then there's multiple feed horns, so you'd actually have to fool every single one of them, and it's very highly improbable.
And so what did you actually see on the radar itself, besides seeing the tracks, which you guys describe as anomalous? And I want to ask why they were described as anomalous, but could you describe them in any sort of shape? Were they in a formation of any shape, or was it a random formation?
Sometimes they'd be lined up. Sometimes they'd be kind of off tilt. There were no like solid formations that I ever saw. Sometimes they'd be in a triangle formation. Sometimes they would just be side by side. Sometimes they'd be kind of haphazard. I didn't really see any like particularly, because if we saw formations and things like that, that would have been an indication that they were more of a threat than they were. Yeah, because then it would have been like an organized offense towards us instead of just kind of flying south at 100 knots.
Right. When was the first time you went up and looked through the big eyes, which are binoculars on the top deck? After you saw, I'm guessing you guys would find these things on the radar and then go up to the deck and try to locate them with your eyes?
The first night that we actually knew that they were unknowns, I kept checking with them to see how far they were. When I thought that I could just barely maybe see them through the big eyes, I'd always try to get up there and go look at them. And I figured at night I'd have a better shot. So the first time I really got to see any of them were at night, and they would just look like white dots on the horizon because they were so far away the first night. Sometimes they'd be a little bit closer. Believe me, I wish I had gotten the up close and personal that Fravor got, but you know, that alone by itself, and then just seeing a white light and then just seeing it just disappear and move to a different point in the horizon and do it in such a fast method and move in such a odd way that, you know, it was, I've said this before, it's odd how it moves because it moves so fast that although your brain registers it moved, it would take you a second to actually realize what had happened. Kind of like if somebody walked over and smacked you in the face really, really hard, and then it's like, oh wait, I just got hit. So then it would be like, oh, it's just like that, but it would be on one point of the horizon, then it would just move to this other point, and it would just, yeah, it would be so ridiculously fast in that movement that I don't even think that we're seeing those type of movements on the spy, but I couldn't tell you that for sure. That's just my personal opinion. I wasn't down there while they were tracking it, so I wouldn't know if they actually saw it or not.
Right. But did you see just one at a time, or did you see multiple through the big eyes at any given time?
Sometimes you could see multiple depending on where you were at, but a lot of times I'd only be able to see, like I'd be only looking at one bearing. So just to see one light would be awesome. And then all of a sudden, you know, sometimes you'd see all three of them if they were within range, but sometimes only one of them would be within range of the big eyes, but they would be, you know, stacked farther away rather than stacked on the same, you know, on the same parallel where I could see them all.
Right. I want to stick to the facts because they're so compelling in themselves, but I'm also curious how you were feeling when you actually see them through your eyes for the first time.
I didn't have like it was just amazing that they were actually real. You know, it's like, just like you, it's just like when you're just looking at them on a screen, you know, they're not real to you. You know they're there, you believe they're there, but to actually know for a fact they were there. And seeing it through the big eyes was cool, but until I saw the video of the intercept, I didn't have any of that oh my God, you know, that kind of mental separation that people get when they realize that something is really truly real and they just witnessed something that's probably they're never going to witness again in their life.
Right. All right. So you mentioned the video. I want to get to that next. So there was the intercept that everyone knows about with Commander Fravor. He's talked about it on Joe Rogan's podcast. Now, you were involved in a very interesting way because you saw an early video of not Commander Fravor's encounter, but another pilot who was using the FLIR pod. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Commander Fravor, although he has a very important role in this by being one of the few pilots that got the up close and personal view of these things, the pilots that actually went up after him were the ones that were able to actually video it. And so that video then ended up on the SIPRNet, which is a secret LAN internet system for the military. It's, you know, super encrypted. You have to have special access to get it. And on that, we were able to actually see this video that was, you know, a much clearer, much longer video. To be honest with you, I'll be honest with you, a good chunk of it was kind of, you know, him just trying to get this thing into focus or just trying to get it in the frame. And, you know, so it really wasn't as compelling as you might want. But the things that you missed that were kind of important is actually seeing it do like right turns in the frame, or seeing it actually move in the way, like as it would get closer to the object, watch it, you know, it might go out of frame, but then all of a sudden right before it goes out of frame, you see it take a right turn or a left turn where it was a right angle turn, you know, not just a veering turn like you would see in you would normally expect.
Right. And for anyone listening who, if anyone is skeptical, just want to point out that another petty officer, Jason Turner, has come forward and corroborated this exact same story, that he too saw a longer version of the video. He said, quote, "It was going berserk. It was so much more than what you see in this video," referring to the video that was recently released.
Yeah, it gave you a true feeling of exactly why these pilots felt compelled to come out and talk about it, because it was, I wish that video was released. And I mean, just the fact that that FOIA report that was just sent out, that they said, yes, there is a video, but it can't be released because it's classified, you know. So it's like, I'm not surprised. I was really surprised that the first even little clip got out.
Right. And how did it get out?
All right, my absolute speculation on it, and I do say speculation, is that it does look like a severely compressed file. Now, back in 2004, you know, you're lucky if you could send a 5 megabyte email. So 5 megabytes worth of video on a you know, digital at that, it would have had to been severely compressed to get sent out. So that I believe what we're seeing is something that somebody emailed from the ship to themselves.
Okay. Now, so it was about 10 minutes, the video that you saw back in 2004?
Yeah, roughly 10 minutes. I couldn't tell you exactly, but I know it was a hell of a lot longer than what we were watching.
Aside from the right turns that it was making, do you recall it having appendages at the bottom?
I know you could see the shadow of them slightly in some of the clips, but I wasn't really worried about like the details of it. I was just kind of looking at the object itself. Being a trained observer, yeah, I should have noticed things like that, but I'll be honest with you, I was more of in shock than anything when I'm watching it, because I'm just like, you know, at first you kind of get that cold feeling and you're just like, then you go a little numb, and then you're like really kind of soaking in exactly what you're seeing, and it's like, no fucking way. I remember there being some type of shadow there, but I don't specifically remember like the L-shaped leg or anything like that. I have to just kind of defer to Commander Fravor's description of them at that point and say that it definitely could have been exactly that way because of the way it looked in the video.
Right. And so Commander Fravor said that it had the L-shaped appendages at the bottom, almost like legs or antenna or something. And Jason Turner, who said he saw the 10-minute video, also saw those appendages. Did you know Jason Turner?
Yeah, me and Jason actually, we were friends on board. On a small ship like that, everybody knows everybody. I mean, the only people you don't really know super well would be like the air deck, because they are technically not a part of the crew. They come on board whenever we deploy. So like say we were going to go on a deployment for 6 months, then we would actually, you know, they a couple of days before we were about to leave, the air deck would come on and bring their equipment on board. And then as we were leaving, you know, they'd fly their helicopters out and land. So then they wouldn't really come on board like the rest of us. So I knew him a little bit better, because I'll be honest with you, when you go on liberty out in these foreign countries. The people that you want to go hang out with are the fire controlmen and the air decks, because those are the guys that are going to have a good time.
Right. So you see this 10-minute video. Do you remember the timeline? I know this is so many years ago, but did you see the video? So this is after the famous intercept, right? This is either on November 10th or after the 10th?
From what I understand from other people's, after the fact and looking back on it and talking with other people, then it would have been probably about the day after the intercept that I got to see this video. And that's also the same day that the tapes would have been taken from me.
Okay, so I was wondering if this was maybe one of those tapes that was taken, and I want to get to that. But just before we do, so at this point, by November 10th, or at least a few days after, you've seen radar anomalous tracks. You've seen the same anomalous tracks with your own eyes, through the big eyes, on top of the ship. You've also seen a video that was taken with a FLIR pod from a pilot who not only saw this with his or her own eyes, but also recorded this for you, Jason Turner, and others to see. I just find that pretty remarkable that we have radar, eyewitness, and video accounts of the same incident with the same witness.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing to me that we can have as many credible accounts of our encounter, similar encounters, other military personnel, trained aviation, personnel, pilots, all over the world. It's all the way from World War II with the Foo Fighters. I mean, these guys aren't up there trying to bullshit anybody. They're up there trying to kill people. I mean, the mentality back then is, hey, I got me 4 last night, and then it's like, oh, did you see that weird shit in the sky the other day? I mean, these guys ain't talking like, they're not worried about all the crap we're worried about today. They don't have a reason to bullshit. I mean, I just got an email from a guy the other day. It was a trained pilot and a police officer. I'm the first person he's ever told that him and a friend of his actually saw a Tic Tac, a shaped object right next to them. It was it's something I'm going to write up a little bit more formally, because there's a lot of, he gave me a lot of details that I can't go public with, not details that are going to be prevalent, but like names and things like that he doesn't want, he doesn't mind his name being used, but the other people involved, he doesn't, doesn't want to, so once I clean all that up, I'm going to actually post that on the UAPAX, the archive initiatives. I've got a Google Drive set up for now until I can get my server up and running, just to kind of house these things that we're getting so that people have access to what we have. It's an effort to stay transparent, as in the organization that we came up with.
And this is UAP Expeditions, which we're going to talk about for anyone listening. Before Gary and I got on, we started talking about his venture, UAP Expeditions, which we're going to talk about for sure. But before we do, I want to ask you something, Gary. What does the word synchronicity mean to you, if anything?
It's a pretty odd thing that's kind of been seems to be popping up an awful lot lately to me. The first time I heard it actually was about a week and a half ago, and I kind of offhandedly heard about it way earlier than that, probably about a month ago. I heard just something about some people doing a thing about goblins in Kentucky or something like that. Some Hellier, that's it. I just happened to hear a little bit about that, and then somebody said the word synchronicity, and that, while they were talking about that, and I just kind of dismissed that at that time because it sounded interesting, and it was like, all right, I'll put it on my list of stuff to watch. And then all of a sudden I start getting like idea about something, and then somebody else, it'll pop up in my feed. Somebody will have like all of this detailed information about this thing that I was actually thinking about, and then all of a sudden I'd get an email, or I'd get an interview with somebody, or like that's how I actually got the idea to do the archive initiative, because it's like I'm sitting there on Twitter with all of you guys, and people are giving people like Mick West a bunch of shit, but really Mick West is he's a very intelligent man. I mean, the guy probably pushes a lot of people's buttons because he's so hardcore skeptic about everything. But really, I get this feeling that he's kind of a little bit like that, just so that you kind of like, well, I know for fact that it's real because of this, because he's looking for that because of this, that classified thing that you're not supposed to talk about. So I kind of get this feeling he was trying to goad a little bit to get a little bit more of the detailed information that he wants out, but because he doesn't really want to have to say, okay, well, I don't want to have to just believe Petty Officer Voorhis. I want to know the specification and the reason why he can say without a shadow of a doubt that it's this. So, but we need guys like that. We need guys that are nuts and bolts guys. We need guys that, say they're descendants from, blue people from, Lepton 6. I don't know. I just made that shit up. But, we need the true believers. We need the nut jobs. We need everybody because the nut jobs are dreamers. They're the guys that come up with these crazy ideas that just might work, then we need the Mick West guys because they're the guys who can be like, well, if that were to work, we need to do this, this, and this, and this. And they slow us down a little bit. So we actually have to think about what we're saying and doing. And, I want to get the entire community together and try to actually really figure out things, really kind of get everybody on the same page. And if you can put your own ego aside, if you can keep yourself in the check, if you can work well with, even if you can't work well with others, if you can just suck it up, buttercup, and work with other people, I've got a place for you. I've got research projects that I want to do. I've got a place where you can connect with other people to do your own research and to validate your own work, and if we don't run into a wall where we just can't prove something, we just show what we got and say, all right, well, we'll put this on the burner until we can, put that in the back until we have more proof of that, and I mean, there's always going to be that aspect, but I have a feeling there's a lot we can prove.
Yeah. So, and the reason I asked you about the word synchronicity was because you mentioned Foo Fighters, and I found that interesting because I was going to ask you about Foo Fighters in just a minute or two. So I found that interesting. I also found it interesting that Sean Cahill and I spoke on the same YouTube channel not too long ago about the idea of synchronicity and the idea of he, you, and all these other people being exactly where they needed to be at exactly the right time to see what they saw back in 2004. I also understand you and Sean Cahill know each other, right?
Yeah, me and Sean, we know each other. He was on the ship while I was on there. He was our master at arms, and he was a smoker at the time, and we all bullshitted. Like I said, it's a small ship. We all do know each other on a small ship. It's not like the carrier where there's 7,000 people. We had like 500.
Yeah.
Even if you don't like somebody, you're gonna run into them.
Yeah.
So it's and the thing is that me, Kevin. There's a whole group of us. I mean, even there's some people that haven't come out that, all feel strongly connected to each other because of this event. It could just be an emotional bond. It could be just psychosomatic. It could be a lot of things. But, people like, Kevin, I feel very protective of Kevin. I feel very protective of PJ and Jason. I feel like they're family to me. Even Sean, Sean, the guy, he's trying to do the very things that I'm trying to do. He's trying to be better tomorrow than he was today. He's constantly trying to evaluate his existence and figure out what the next step is. And, to me that those are all special things that just about every person in this group has all in common.
I just talking to a few of you guys, I completely agree. I was lucky enough to speak to PJ on this channel as well. He was one of the first ones I talked to. And so this gets us back to the story because right after Commander Fravor's intercept, and right after that other FLIR pod actually captured what had happened up there after the Hawkeye had apparently captured some data about what had happened up in the sky with the Tic Tac, something really bizarre happened. My understanding is PJ was in a similar role to you. He was taking care of these bricks, these hard drives that had the Hawkeye data. What happened on his ship, the Nimitz, was that two guys in a helicopter landed. They came on, they asked for the hard drives. PJ handed them over. They didn't sign them out. They left with his commanding officer, took off, clearing all the data of the whole incident from the Hawkeye. My understanding is on the other ship, on the Princeton, almost the exact same thing happened to you. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Somebody had come on board and had requested all of our data recording. All of our data recording that was available was given to them. And then we were also requested to go to any of the tapes that we had that were blank, whether they were brand new or not, and literally erase them. It's just and that was mostly just so that it would have a timestamp on it, so that they're gonna know whether or not there was anything on them at that point.
And who directed you exactly to do that, to erase it?
That would have been a superior petty officer, somebody that was in charge of me at the time.
And has that person, or has anyone who was sort of complicit, I want to say, in the cover-up, such as P.J. Hughes's commanding officer, people who weren't necessarily dictating that these drives be handed over, but who seemed to at least be the middlemen who were being commanded by two men who landed through helicopter, were telling their subordinates, you got to hand this shit over?
Most of the time, I mean, it doesn't really happen like that. They would be sent, and it would just be under the understanding, and before they even get there, it's going to be known that these people are coming to get them. So it wouldn't be just like these guys show up unannounced, give me all your shit, and move on. Honestly, whenever an event happens, whether it's a man overboard, a crashed aerial vehicle, a standard aerial vehicle, or any type of event, there's going to be somebody coming for these tapes. Sometimes it would be after we hit port if it was something that was cleared up and validated at it. But in this situation, I think that they were already ready to go because they already knew what was going on. I have a feeling that the second day that we were tracking these, it's already been reported up the chain of command. And, I have the feeling that like my captain didn't really want to have anything to do with this whole situation. And I think that's mostly just to the stigma of, what the military's turned reporting this type of stuff into. It's like, you seen any aliens lately? I mean, all the jokes to go along with it. But when it comes down to it, I mean, there's something going on. We need to kind of figure out what it is.
Right. All right. So the two guys, they come on board. So what's the first you heard of two guys coming on board, or the first you heard you had to hand over the drives? Was this similar to PJ's story where you get a knock on the door?
Well, on a small ship, it's a little easier to know what's going on. For me, all right, so I was up in the hangar with the Crash and Smash bullshit and with the Crash and Smash team. I have to make that very clear because I know one of my first interviews, I said I was up there with the Crash and Smash team, and it sounded like I was actually on that team. Mm-hmm. And this is a team of people that are basically just hanging out in the hangar just in case the helicopter crashes. That's about it. So, but I saw the helicopter landed because you go to flight quarters anytime the helicopter lands so that nobody is around the flight deck. That's the way everybody on the ship's aware that there's a aircraft landing on board. On a smaller ship, that's a way more important thing because whenever there's not flight quarters, we smoke back there. So you don't want to be just all of a sudden walking outside and then there's a helicopter landing right there. So then I saw two guys get off khakis, polo shirts. Could have been Jake from State Farm kind of thing. Nothing out of the ordinary. No black suits. They weren't. I didn't have glasses. They weren't stern, walking in like they're about to kill somebody. A couple of guys, normally dressed. Then at a certain point, I was requested to come down and to a space that we owned, and in that space, they're just like, all right, we need all the data recording tapes that you have available. I'm like, all right, so I had to go up to the computer room, track them all down, and I'll be honest, I thought about not giving them all, but when it comes down to it, you get caught doing that, that's Leavenworth, that's jail time. So just to the fear of that kind of reprimand, I did give all the tapes that we had. So there was nothing left behind, and anything that would have been left behind if I happened to not give them one, all that was all erased. So
what could have been on those tapes based on what you know about what happened?
All right, so it would have been mostly Spy 1 Bravo data. It would have been the tracks, but it's going to be all raw data. So, like, unless you use the programs that we use to run the sun stations, you're not going to see anything on there unless you have those applications. Just like if, you know, I give you a file and you don't have the right, you know, you don't have Microsoft Word to open it, it's going to be the same thing. You know, it's just going to be the raw data. You know, that's what's being recorded on there. So it'll have environmentals, it'll have ship sensor data, it'll have anything to do with the Spy 1 Bravo system, the Aegis system, basically anything that's tied into the Aegis system, it will have all of that raw data for them to, you know, so it's a status of all the weapon systems, of everything that's tied into it.
So they cleared shop. They went on both ships. They took all the data from the whole incident. So talking to PJ about this, do you guys think these were the same exact people? It sounds, based on the descriptions, slightly different, because I think he says they were in Air Force insignia, but I mean, they could have been from the same organization, if not in the same exact clothes or the same exact people.
Yeah, because on a carrier with the massive amount of brass that's on the carrier, things have to be a little bit more official. On a smaller ship like mine, things are a little bit more laid back. So that's probably why they didn't feel like they had to send like somebody that was official looking. I have no idea who they were. It could have been a tech rep, or it could have been, you know, Air Force officials like they were over on the carrier.
Unusual though, or not unusual for people to come and take data like that?
While we were at sea, that's a bit unusual, but I'll be honest with you, it wasn't unexpected. I mean, we just tracked unknown aircraft. I mean, I expected them faster than they came.
Okay, so then a question about that. So you mentioned maybe these people were tracking them along with you, but then how would they know that there was this intercept? Because they didn't land on day 1 or 2 or 3 when you and Kevin Day had seen these things on radar. They landed after the fact when the planes had actually seen them up close, right?
Yeah, it was after the intercepts. It would have been in a report for the intercepts. I mean, that would all be just common knowledge at that point.
So PJ said that the unknown man who goes by the pseudonym Roger, who was on the Hawkeye, I think he was the radar technician aboard the Hawkeye, he signed an NDA, and I think everyone who was aboard that Hawkeye signed NDAs saying that what they saw, which apparently was the Tic Tac coming up close to the Hawkeye, never happened. Did you, or did Kevin, or did anyone else in the positions you guys were in sign NDAs? And if not, why do you think that is, that some did and some didn't?
I didn't sign an NDA. The only thing I signed was a chain of custody for the tapes. But as far as I know, that Hawkeye crew is the only crew and the only people that actually had to sign an NDA. That's going to be one of two reasons, in my perspective, is either their chain of command basically jumped the gun and didn't want them talking about it. So you got to remember that each one of these flight deck groups has their own commanding officer. So just like where Commander Fravor was the actual commanding officer of his flight crew, there would have been another commanding officer in charge of the Hawkeye flight crew. So, you know, he could have jumped the gun and said, "Look, have them all sign NDAs. I don't want them talking about it." Or the only other option I can think of is maybe they knew something that we all didn't.
And the only thing that I could imagine that might be, based on my conversation with PJ, was that he told me the Hawkeye had some sort of technology capability that was unknown and confidential, and that technology itself he couldn't talk about. So I don't know if that would be, I mean, obviously they saw the Tic Tac. That would be one reason to sign the NDA, but then maybe it has to do with that secret technology and what it may have captured. If it was a sensor, I don't know what it was capturing.
I mean, I know it's got a variety of things, from electronic warfare sensors to, you know, I mean, it's got an electronics package on them and a sensor package. It's basically the reason why they call it an eye in the sky. It's pretty amazing. So I mean, I don't know the exact tech he was talking about, so I couldn't really comment on that. But I could see how they would be able to see something that we couldn't, or they may have been able to pick up something that we couldn't, especially if they did have an unknown tech on board. You know, we were we were testing a lot of stuff, you know, because like we had the CC system that was on board that was brand spanking new. We were the first battle group to even deploy that.
I read that both you and Kevin Day had data to suggest that one of these craft or multiple of these craft dropped from 28,000 feet to 50 feet right above sea level in 0.78 seconds. Can you tell us why you guys think that?
Because it happened on the radar and we were able to track it.
Yeah. And is there any chance that the radar wasn't tracking it accurately? Did it happen just one time or was it multiple times?
Yeah, it might have been faster. If it went to a certain speed, it would stop tracking it because, but it would have to be ridiculously fast. Because I mean, even at that, I think it's something. I forgot the exact number, but it was something like a Mach 22 or something like that.
Yeah, this says 24,000 miles per hour.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And so, could this be just some crappy radar? Can you tell us anything about Spy One radar and its capabilities?
So our nickname for this is reverse engineered alien tech, and that was before any of this happened. We just kind of joked around because we just thought it was the neatest fucking system.
The radar itself, right?
Yeah, the radar itself, because it can track a ridiculous amount of objects going at ridiculous speeds consistently. It doesn't stop tracking. It doesn't move. It can keep a 360-degree eye of the entire sky around it in a specific amount of miles at all times while it's on.
Right.
And, so it is amazing.
Do you know if multiple objects did that same drop from 28,000 down to 50, or was it just one? Was it just the one that Commander Fravor saw?
From time to time, they'd be dropping everywhere. I mean, it was, they could just do and go wherever they wanted. So, I mean, sometimes they'd pop up there and come back down. Sometimes but this is all after the intercept. Prior to this intercept, you got to remember, they were literally just happy floating due south until the intercepts.
And that sort of activated them in a sense.
It's more of that they reacted to it rather than were activated, and I think that's a lot of the reason why they weren't really weren't considered a threat and why they didn't have a full weapons loadout. Plus, we didn't have full weapons to put in a loadout. I think the only thing they could have probably done is throw some bullets in the airplanes, or maybe loaded up a helicopter with some 60 cals or something like that. Which, I'll be honest with you, is not going to do much against this stuff.
Right. So I know there's a lot of speculation about whether or not they went in the water, because the way Commander Fravor described it was like roiling water as if a 747 was submerged. I heard that you have reason to believe that these things did go in the water. In fact, we may have had submarines that were communicating back to us, telling us that.
All right. So I had a junior technician, a sonar technician, tell me that they had an underwater track. Now, he said that in a very general sense, so as in us as a battle group. I have not been able to get a hold of that particular person. He has not been responsive to my emails or my inquiries about it. Now, a more senior technician that was a good friend of mine went ahead and explained that if it did happen, it wasn't the Princeton. We would have had to have our sonar buoys, which is a big, long towed array that goes behind our ship, to be able to actually get distance, be able to get that kind of information. And so you need not only the sonar dome, but also this towed array. And we didn't have our array out, so it wasn't coming from our ship. So if we did have an underwater track, that's the only person that I've heard it from. Now, I have had several people that were in our little group of people that heard that there was one, but it's all hearsay. I have zero actual solid proof that it happened, and I want to make that very, very clear.
Kevin said that he thought these craft wanted to show themselves. He said, quote, they wanted to show themselves. What was your sense? Obviously, these things weren't cloaking. They were kind of in broad daylight. At nighttime, they glowed. Was your sense that they were there, conspicuously or inconspicuously? Did they care that they may have been observed by you guys? Did they know they were being observed by you guys?
I have a feeling they had to know that we were observing them, and I have a feeling that they didn't care. So I can concur. I feel the same way as Kevin does in that aspect, which is, why I kind of I'm on the fence about, whether these are, terrestrial or extraterrestrial or anything like that. So that's why you'll always find me kind of steering a little bit hesitantly away from the more spiritual aspects of this. But I got a feeling if like this was like primary technology from the actual people that made it, maybe it wouldn't be as conspicuous as much as it was. It's almost like it was part of a, that they really just didn't care. I don't think, I don't, and if they knew like where our cap point was and stuff like that, and this is all information I found out afterwards, that means that either they already knew, or they already, they had technology where they could listen, or they know where our planes were going, like they have their own radar systems of some type. Because I mean, obviously that types of information, they would have had to have some way to find that out.
Before the call, I was myself just like going through a thought exercise of why may this be our own military technology and why may this not be our own military technology, and I just wanted to see which reasons made the most sense. And so if you don't mind, I just wanted to run through some of them and see maybe if there are others that you thought about that I might be missing.
Go ahead and hit me.
Awesome. So reasons it might have been our own military technology doing, a test, essentially a blind test on our own military. So one, whoever would be testing this knew that our planes didn't have any live ammunition, so it was a safe test. Why ask Commander Fravor to intercept something that you don't know about without any weapons if it may pose a threat? Two, this was a relatively safe area to test in because there aren't civilians here. These people are already doing a test, so why not layer another test on top of it? Kevin mentioned that it might be dangerous. It may even be illegal to do that, to unwitting test subjects. And I think that's a great point. I do think, though, if you were going to go against ethics and even the law, which I don't know what it is about in this situation, this would be an ideal beta environment to test in. Three, the Nimitz strike group, of which you were a part, was using the most advanced technology at the time, everything from the Hawkeye down to the Spy 1 radar. So, if you wanted to understand your most cutting edge technology, I guess you would want to test it against your best available technology. Four, the Tic Tac did know Commander Fravor's cap point, which either meant it somehow knew it before, he knew it, or it knew it because, the same people who knew the cap point were testing out this new technology. And lastly, five, the two men who landed in the helicopter, how did they arrive there so fast, if they didn't have advanced knowledge of what was going on? So I find all those reasons really compelling. And for that reason, part of me leans towards this being top secret military technology. But before I ask you a question about it, the reason this may not be our military technology, this was 16 years ago, and we still don't have any technology remotely close to this, at least that anyone knows about. And to keep this secret for over a decade seems pretty unlikely. Also, there have been reports of this, obviously dating back to the 50s and before, but to do these tests on unwitting test subjects, many of whom, like yourself, have come forward, it's not exactly the best way to keep something like this secret. Two, we don't have, and no foreign government that we know of has any technology remotely close to us that can hover for days at a time. They'd see these things in the air, they'd land, other pilots would take off, these things would still be in the air. So what was powering these things that they could stay in the air for so long, going so slowly at times, 100 knots, but also going so quickly at times? We don't have anything that can do that. We don't have anything that can drop from 28,000 feet down to 50 feet in 0.78 seconds, that's for sure. Four, UAP have shown a keen interest in our military for a long time. And you had mentioned earlier in the conversation the Foo Fighters. In World War II, pilots would observe very similar, at times, Tic Tac cigar-shaped craft appearing and then disappearing, stalking them. This was not confined to the Nimitz strike group in 2004. In 2005, the USS Roosevelt had very similar experiences where pilots were being stalked by craft. And lastly, admitting that technology like this is not our own would be exposing our military's vulnerabilities. It's very probable that this is reverse engineered extraterrestrial technology that our own military is in possession of and actively testing, or it's extraterrestrial technology that we are not in possession of and therefore unable to explain to the general public. What do you think about the two possibilities?
I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head with a lot of that point. Kevin, he's hard on that. He doesn't think the government would go against and do anything illegal to test this stuff. But I be honest with you, that's about one of the few points that we don't agree with. I think that they would pretty much do whatever they want as long as they weren't going to be held accountable for it. I think that the only time that the government worries about doing anything is if they could be in any way accountable for what they do. If for all the same points that you made, I'm also on the fence exactly of what these things are, whether they're reverse engineered or whether it was because I've had other ideas technology cartels like the diamond cartels and oil cartels. We hoard all of our resources on this planet for profit. Why wouldn't we do the same thing with technology, where there'd be a very, very small amount of people that were actually able to utilize this crazy advanced technology because of either their status, power, or the wealth they've gained. Because I always kind of jokingly joke with people about health insurance keeps you alive, but money keeps you healthy. So it's kind of always been like that in our society. So that's why I've stayed on the fence about it. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a very easy task for us to really figure out what these things are doing, or why they're here, or if it's us or somebody or something else. I've gotten all kinds of people that tell me things like, they're transdimensional beings, they're from they're from a higher existence, one of the things that you got to realize is unless you can kind of throw me a physics equation or a proof or a theorem that might, be plausible, I'm a skeptical believer in just about everything. It's like I watched X-Files like all the rest of you geeks, and I loved the shit out of it. But, just like they said, the truth is out there, and likely if we truly knew the truth, that we might be one of those people not relaying it. You don't know whether you would or not until you know it. I know if I honestly thought it was for the best, I would, and I found out the truth, I'd tell everybody. That's a lot of the reason why I'm really trying hard with UAPX and the Archive Initiative to try to stay as transparent as possible. We're not going to go into the business with the government anytime soon. We're not going to do any of that stuff. So it's going to be slow. It's going to be a lot of, basically we're starting in a garage and working our way up. And hopefully with the help of the community and everybody in the world, then we hopefully someday will become a prominent place in society of, maybe the people that finally got shit straight.
So Gary, why don't you take this opportunity to tell everyone about UAP Expeditions, the kind of work you guys are doing, and maybe where they could find more information about you guys?
So a little history on it is, so Kevin calls me up one day and says, hey, you want to be the president of a nonprofit that we want to start? And I'm like, no. I go, are you kidding me, dude? I'm working I work a 60-hour week job. I ain't got time for that shit. He goes, well, will you at least be the vice president? And I'm like, yeah, whatever, I really didn't take it all that serious at first. And then all of a sudden, he comes out of nowhere with, people like Kevin Knuth and Deep and I'm like, oh my God, these are like real scientists that make me feel stupid, I mean, as much as I think and as much as I do, I mean, these guys have what I wish I had, they have what I want, So, I mean, then all of a sudden I did start taking it a lot more serious. I did lean back a little bit just while I was getting a lot of my personal ducks in a row. I just had a baby a year ago, and,
Congrats.
So. Yeah. So, there's a lot of stuff going on with that. And I got now she's 1.5. And basically, if I could spend my entire day with her every day, I would.
Yeah, I hear it right now, I think.
Yeah, she's up in the back room and giggling and laughing with Mama. She's trying to keep her happy while we do the interview. We're definitely getting a lot more organized. We did elect a board of directors. We have an official board of directors. We're an official nonprofit. We got our website up. We got incoming will be our. We're going to start accepting donations soon. And the whole primary thing that started this is the idea that Kevin had to go back out there and try to find them. And I was like, well, you guys have fun, but I'll definitely help you any way I can, to now being like on the crew.
So what does that mean exactly? Are you guys going back out to the West Coast to like Guadalupe Island?
We are going down there to the very place that we track these things, and we are going to try to find them. We have done a lot of legwork. We've done a lot of using a lot of resources, from interviews that TTSA did to our own interviews of people in that area. And we have credible accounts of things happening for the last 100 years. As long as there's been people in that area, they've got accounts. There's fishermen that have been, third, fourth generation fishermen that have, they've been seeing this stuff forever. It's, there's around Catalina Island around there, they got this magnetic anomaly to the north of the island. We've got a whale migration that goes through there. We've got all these weird things. We got all this stuff going on in that area. So we're going to be analyzing different types of radiation in the area, electromagnetics, the water. We're going to try to figure out what makes this area so special. And then obviously just try to get some real hard data on it, real actual science.
Right. I saw Lou Elizondo and Sean Cahill had been out there and had talked about it being a hot spot, had spoken to fishermen, local fishermen who had seen similar things popping in and out of the water for like decades. Is there any working theory? Is the whale migration still a contender? What are people thinking? Why might that be a hot spot? Any ideas on
it? For me, one of my thoughts is like, because like I said, just like you sat down and you try to do a mental of why, what they are, why they're here, that type of thing. And one of the theories that I had, and I have way too many of them at this point, but is that if there was ever another civilization on this planet that was an advanced civilization, if they had any technology left, they could have had a drone system that took care of the planet or even monitored the planet. And if any of these things survived under the oceans, they could be building, maintaining an entire fleet of drones that just literally monitor the status of the planet. And literally, because their owners are been long dead for, thousands and thousands of years, they still just have programming to do that and just keep doing it over and over again. And, that was and then this could be where one of those nodes are, or it could just be an underwater alien base. Who knows? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Pilots said that they saw into the water, which wasn't substantiated as a mothership or anything. It was just an object of, 747 size under the water, which they didn't say if it had wings or not. So I don't know. But other than that, everything we saw seemed to all be the same.
Okay. Okay.
So there's the interview, and here's all your extra questions, and I just left you with just another bigger question to ask, which is unfortunate because that's where you're now, where we all are.
Well, the question I want to know from you is, who is your chief petty officer? And to PJ Hughes, who is your commanding officer? Because if we get those names, and I know people don't want to throw superiors in the service under the bus, but if we get their names, those people have some knowledge of who landed and who asked for that data. I think that could get us somewhere.
Ironically, at that time, I didn't have a chief. He had actually left the ship, but the guy that was in charge of me has not decided to come forward, so I won't give his name. And that's where you're going to run into a wall a lot of times. The people that we won't give their names to, I mean, some of these guys are really decent guys. Some of them have businesses of their own. Some of them have very high clearances and are working in the government still. They've got real reasons, actual reasons why they can't come forward. And maybe someday they will, but we have to be, we have to be good to these people. These were our shipmates. These are the people that our lives were in their hands, their lives were in our hands. So that's not going to change any day of the week, no matter how much somebody wants to know it. And you're more than, you can ask me whatever question you want. I'll tell you what color underwear I'm wearing. It doesn't matter, dude. We none of us care. You can ask all the questions you want, and we're only going to be able to tell you what we can. If we ever get permission, I'll tell you everything they have to say.
We have so much good information and so many reliable different sources corroborating and so many different types of data corroborating. But like all of these famous cases, it seems there's some missing data too. And if we could only recover some of the missing data, and I'm sure this pains you the most because you had it in your possession, you and PJ on different ships had this stuff taken. I mean, how does it make you feel looking back on those moments? Do you wish you could have done more to hold on to it? Because we will never be able to go back and find out what was really in the sky or what was really in the water. But if we can somehow go back and track where that data went next, I think we could maybe find this thing.
Well, I have a feeling they are in government archives. And once they've been classified or deemed that it was either a threat to public or national security, we're not going to see any of it ever. At least not until definitely a different feel. I mean, if we ever get to a situation where we're not in constant conflict with the other people of this world, and we have a different outlook on life, I think that's about the only way that a lot of this information will come to light. Or if, aliens land on the White House lawn. Mm-hmm. But how I feel about it is that I did the only thing I could have done back then. So I don't have any regrets about what I did. But do I wish I could have taken a copy of everything? You bet your ass I wish I could have. I wish I could have gotten a copy of the original video too. But I mean, literally, as soon as that thought came into my head to do that, I went down to my shop to get a zip drive to do it. A zip disk to do it, and by the time I got back, it was no longer available on the LAN. So, and you got to remember, when you download anything off of a secret LAN, a SIPRNet, it marks it. It tells what information you took and when and what time and how much information was So I mean, eventually, somebody probably would have asked me about it. So I'm kind of glad I didn't.
Did the New York Times interview you, or did any of those journalists reach out back in 2017 when they were kind of breaking the story about ATIP and Nimitz?
I hadn't come out about it at all at that point. I saw the article after the fact, and believe it or not, I'm not an avid reader of the New York Times, so I really didn't know it. It even came out, and then it was just a little bit after that when Kevin Day had actually contacted me. Him and Dave Beatty had been doing research about, maybe people on the ship that could have good information about it. And at first I was like, real hesitant about it. And he didn't, he's just like, oh, look, we got a shipmate that came out about this. He needs our support. Something happened, and I know something happened. And, eventually I went on the record for it. But like I said, I'm in a different situation than a lot of these guys. So the only thing I got to worry about is just keeping my family safe, and that's it. And I mean, even that's a big worry because, sometimes when you're in these big when you're on social media and you got, I get, 10, 20 friend requests every day. And, I don't know who they really are. It's all digital media. They could be anybody. Mm-hmm. But, trying to keep transparent, trying to stay, out there so people can, ask us the questions that they want to ask. And, maybe somebody will finally ask that one question that I never thought of that I know the answer to, but, and I can actually tell them, and they came up with the key that, or, just because I have the memories of things doesn't mean that I've thought about it. Right. So that's why I like all these interviews, because sometimes people come up with shit that I never even thought about asking, even asking myself. So I thank all of you. I thank the entire community because they challenge me constantly, and it's honestly real refreshing to see that there's this much talent out there and this much of dedicated people that either want to disprove or prove it either way, but there's some serious brain power sitting out there just waiting to be utilized and tapped, and and so I really hope that everybody thinks hard about, maybe not so much criticizing each other as much as we tend to do. And believe me, we're all prone to it. That's why I love it when an actual troll gets on there and starts getting just ridiculous, because then I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and flame this guy because get all that, get it all out, get all that poison I've been building up and not saying out.
Yeah, people are relentless. And like people like Mick West, I appreciate. I'm in a back and forth with him on Twitter right now. And to your point earlier, I think people like him are great because not only, could they be doing so much worse stuff with their time or useless stuff with their time, like he is engaged on these issues, even if he's taking the contrarian view, but they also help us kind of understand how we should vet these situations before we deem them credible, right? Because if we just say everything's credible, then we lose all credibility. So I think Mick's methodical about how he considers different factors that you might not. And it's important, I think, that we consider all of those. But in the case of Nimitz, and I think there are a bunch of other events out there that are also credible, you can talk about swamp gas and weather balloons and every single prosaic explanation, and they still don't answer the question about what it was. So I think even Mick West would be lying to himself if he said that these things are easily explainable.
I don't know if you got to see that interview I had with him.
No.
But I did an interview with him. He's got his own channel. I won't plug it here because that's just kind of rude. But either way, even during the interview, he was always.
You can if you want. I don't care.
No, it's fine. You could do it in your synopsis or whatever. But he was very courteous. He didn't. He wasn't sitting there yelling at me, telling me I was a liar or anything like that. He was just. It's like he believes that I believe the account, and now he wants to analyze it and try to figure out exactly what it is. He doesn't necessarily believe that there's anything in this world that is out of the ordinary, and that everything has a practical explanation. And if it doesn't, he'd like to know how or why. So I can respect him in that manner. And like I said, even though he was, some people saw the things that he was doing as a little disrespectful during the interview, but as for somebody that was in the interview, he was never actually disrespectful to me. I want to give Dave Beatty as much props as I can. Without him, none of us would have come together. His Nimitz project, his Nimitz Encounter project, was the catalyst that we wouldn't even be talking today without him.
Yeah.
And he's been kind of left in the dark a little bit and kind of pushed off to the side throughout this whole thing because of how things roll in this industry and then in this field, in this group. But I want to bring him to the front again. I want to let people know that we're talking like thousands of hours of research this guy's done on the Nimitz Encounter.
Yeah.
He probably knows it better than any of us that were there.
Yeah. So we'll do him justice and drop a link to the Nimitz Encounter documentary in the YouTube description, and check out Dave Beatty's film. You'll see it. Yeah, go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, you can also get a hold of him, and he might even be willing to do an interview with you if you want. And I tell you what,
awesome.
He's definitely a detail-orientated guy that you could pick his brain about some of the things on it. And he's talked to so many people about it, and he's even talked to a lot of the people that I don't even have access to. So he's definitely a well of knowledge and resource about the Nimitz Encounter.
Okay, that's awesome. That's a great resource. Let me ask you one final question, Gary. Did the craft disappear after November 10th, after the intercept and after the data was taken? Did they ever show up on radar again?
I've been getting this question a lot lately, and I don't remember. I really, truly just don't remember. I remember after I saw that video, that was kind of the last thing I do remember about any of that. The next thing I remember is really kind of being in Puerto Vallarta on a little 7-day hiatus where I sat on the beach drinking and eating meat on a stick for 7 days.
Yeah.
So it's that's a little odd. I honestly never thought about it until now, but
I didn't either. I literally never thought of the question until now. I'm just thinking because I always heard about events up until the 10th is the famous day, and then you hear about what happened to you and PJ, where the guys land and take away all the data. Never heard anything about what happened. Next.
after I saw the video and after the hoopla stopped and I didn't hear anything more about it, I really just don't remember really anything after that.
I'm curious to ask the others if anyone remembers, because I haven't heard anything about
you and me both.
11th
That's
on.
actually a question. See, this is why I love these interviews, because even things that I don't think about, cause somebody else has asked me that in an interview too, and I kind of just brushed it off a little bit at the time. But lately, with this whole synchronicity thing, I've been trying to pay a little bit more attention to things, and I'm gonna. There's that, and there's a couple other questions that I actually wanted to ask Jason, because he saw the video too. So there were some questions about the video I had that I wanted to get certain details that I seem to remember, that see if he concurs with them without me having to lead him into it. Yeah, that's actually kind of got me a little concerned that I can't remember anything after that.
All right. I want to thank you, Gary, for all your time, because this was such an awesome conversation. I also want to ask, is there any lead that I should be following after this conversation? Anyone on the ship that I should talk to? Anyone you know about who maybe wants to come forward but hasn't yet, or maybe someone we could coax into doing so?
I think Kevin would probably be a pretty good interview. We've got you got Jason Turner. And we also got let me pull up the list, because we've got other shipmates that have come forward that haven't had a lot of exposure, and we definitely want to get them out there and get them heard.
Yeah, I'd love to have Jason on. Definitely Kevin too.
So like one of my shipmates named Omar Lara, he came forward. And that's OMARLARA.